During the third episode of the first season of A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms, the latest spin-off from Game of Thrones, a young squire named Egg, so called because he's a character who looks like an egg,
I'm sure that Egg is a very nice person.
finds himself contemplating a bawdry drinking song about a disabled woman named Alice, renowned for her ability to sexually satisfy her lovers.
Do you think her name was really Alice?
No. I just think Alice is a nice name to write a song to.
That means there was a cripple girl who was so good at pleasuring men in their bums that they saw fit to celebrate her in song, and yet they could not bother credit her true name.
It is a small exchange, but it feels somewhat central to the larger first season of A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms, which is an exploration of the very idea of nobility. The show wrapped its first season this weekend, and it's pretty good. We're going to talk about the show's somewhat more modest perspective when compared to the previous two series in the franchise, how it uses that perspective to say something about the world in which it unfolds and the world in which it's made, and the strange optimism at the heart of this spin-off from a largely cynical franchise. This will involve talking with spoilers about the season as a whole, and will involve talking about the other two Game of Thrones shows, one of which takes place later in the timeline. We may also dig a little bit into the lore to help illuminate some of the show's bigger thematic ideas. So, if you want to watch it but you haven't had a chance yet, you should tourney around right now. Maybe go watch some episodes and come back later to night. You know I'd keep going, but I don't want to end up with egg on my face. The eponymous Knight of the Seven Kingdoms, Sir Dunk the Tall, is a hedge knight. That is a knight who does not belong to a major house.
It's like a knight, but sadder.
Sir Dunk is an unknown, the former squire of Sir Arlen of Pennytree, seeking to participate in a tournament to make a name for himself. When Sir Duncan arrives at such a tournament in Ashford, he finds nobody who will vouch for the deceased Sir Arlen.
How could you have forgotten him?
We've forgotten men who reaped much more than a wound.
The truth is, even Dunk himself acknowledges that Sir Arlen was not especially memorable.
He held no lands, sired no children.
When Sir Duncan does eventually find somebody who can vouch for Sir Arlen, that's Prince Baelor Breakspear Targaryen, this third party hardly offers the most romantic assessment of the dead knight.
He never won a tourney that I know, but he never shamed himself either.
This is perhaps a backhanded compliment. The best thing that one could say about Sir Arlen is that he was not actively awful, but it affords the deceased knight more dignity than any of the other lords and knights in attendance at this celebration of chivalry. And this is the central question of A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms. Is it better to be a great knight, or simply a good man? One of the more interesting aspects of Game of Thrones was the show's willingness to engage, particularly in its earlier seasons, with the lives of those who existed in the shadows of the noble upper class. The show would often feature guest appearances from acting troupes or farming families, or even religious communities, create a sense of context for the show's epic struggle. Indeed, this is arguably one of the bigger issues with House of the Dragon, the first of the Game of Thrones spin-offs. That show has, in its second season, largely lost sight of the small folk, those who live caught in the gravity of these great leaders and these epic events. Game of Thrones was often a deconstruction of the romantic fantasy of the good queen, the myth of the noble leader, anointed by prophecy or divinity or blood right, who rules unquestioned and unchallenged in service of some greater good. A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms feels in some ways like an extension of that central theme, focusing as it does on a common-born orphan who claims to be a knight but has no evidence to support his claim. It's ultimately revealed that Egg is really the errant Prince Aegon Targaryen. Egg? Aegon? He is the son of Prince Maegor Targaryen, and so part of the royal dynasty. Egg conceals his nobility for the first half of the season to walk among the common folk and ultimately seems to become the richer for it. Throughout A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms, there is a recurring sense that Duncan understands more of honor and duty than those who have the luxury of being born to it. He balks when Plummer, the steward of Ashford, proposes a scheme to throw the tournament in order to make a profit on the long odds. When he happens upon Prince Aerion Targaryen assaulting a puppeteer, Duncan instinctively steps in to protect the innocent woman. When Baelor chides Duncan for intervening, Duncan responds by asking whether Baelor might have stepped in to stop his nephew.
I might have, but I'm a prince of the realm, not a hedge knight.
Don't all knights make the same oath? To protect the innocent?
There's a sense that Duncan is one of the few knights to actually believe in this sense of chivalry and honor. As one might expect in a spin-off from Game of Thrones, the nobles of Westeros are motivated largely by self-interest. When Duncan challenges Aerion to trial by combat to prevent Aerion from claiming his hand and his foot as compensation for the humiliation, Aerion responds by insisting upon an archaic tradition,
Trial by stone,
of 7-on-7 combat to protect himself. This 7-by-7 combat naturally benefits Aerion, who has the luxury of being born to a royal household and being surrounded by an honor guard who are sworn to protect him. Even seemingly selfless actions are ultimately self-serving. Baelor ultimately joins Duncan's party, but as Sir Lionel Baratheon points out in the finale, Arion's loyal bodyguards are also sworn not to hurt another member of the royal household.
We fought for you, your prince. Fought for you against men sworn to protect him. He risked nothing.
Lionel is not wrong. Baelor's strategy during the contest is to tie up the royal bodyguards who have sworn an oath to do him no harm, so that the rest of the party can focus on the other challengers. This is a life and death struggle for Duncan, but it is largely treated as entertainment for the local nobility, even seemingly decent nobles like Baelor. These nobles live a life completely removed from the commoners. Duncan is initially impressed by Sir Donal of Duskendale, who presents himself humbly as,
We were crabbers of Duskendale.
This is just the myth of a self-made man. Egg, who has a deeper understanding of the mechanics of the realm, reframes that for Duncan.
I'll have you know, Sir Donal of the Kingsguard is but the son of a crabber.
His father owns half the crabbing fleets in Westeros.
As with both Game of Thrones and House of the Dragon before it, there's a sense of contemporary resonance to this pseudo-medieval fantasy, a sense in which A Night of the Seven Kingdoms is a fairy tale for a nation in decline. These nobles do nothing to improve the standards of living for their subjects.
and I never knew a joust to change the price of eggs.
This, by the way, is both a nice bit of foreshadowing of Dunk's effect on Egg, teaching the young prince actual decency and nobility, and proof that HBO doesn't need John Oliver on the air to do late-night topical political humor.
We'd be limiting egg purchases to 1 dozen per customer per day, though if you're going through that many eggs, I'm guessing you're used to being limited?
Naturally, this folly has consequence. During the tournament, Maekor strikes his elder brother Baelor with a mace. This cleaves the back of Baelor's head open, a wound that does not become apparent until his helmet is removed. Both Arion and Duncan survive the match, but Maekor kills Baelor, his beloved brother. Baelor is a decent man, beloved by his family and his people. As his young Valar puts it in the finale,
he had in him to be a great king, the greatest since Aegon the Dragon.
The dramatic core of this first season ends up being a trial by combat to assuage the wounded ego of a psychopathic young prince, with Duncan caught in the middle of it for nothing more than doing the right thing. There is an appealing smallness to A Night of the Seven Kingdoms, which paints this sort of power structure as inherently pathetic compared to the awesome scale and spectacle of Game of Thrones or House of the Dragon. Even Baelor's funeral seems quaint compared to similar scenes in those shows, his body cremated in a quarry on a dull and overcast day. In some ways, Game of Thrones is a cynical franchise. It portrays a deeply cynical world. There are decent characters within that world, of course, but they are often victims of forces beyond their own control. Most obviously, the first season of Game of Thrones focuses on the truly honorable Ned Stark, whose decency ultimately plunges the realm into war. Let's just say that Ned's sense of honor throws the characteristics of the rest of the cast into stark relief. In contrast to Game of Thrones, A Night of the Seven Kingdoms is positively optimistic. In a world where power is wielded by the corrupt, the indifferent, or the insane, true nobility is to be found in the common man. Dunk is not only decent, but he is ultimately vindicated. He has done the right thing. No matter the outcome of the contest, he has at the very least shown a potential future ruler of the realm what decency looks like. It's almost wholesome. For viewers who are familiar with the mythology of Martin's world, there is a knowing irony here. After Baelor's death, his brother wonders if it was worth it to save Duncan's foot.
How can a foot be worth a prince's life? Mightn't it be that some morrow will come when I'll have need that foot, when the realm will need that foot even more than a prince's life? Not bloody likely.
Fans of the books know that the foot will come in handy at Summerhall, a disastrous event for the Targaryen dynasty, but where Duncan's actions saved the lives of 2 of the heirs present. Unbeknownst to Maekar or even to Duncan, that foot will be worth the life of a prince and a princess. Duncan is ultimately validated by history. There's a tendency to treat Game of Thrones as a deconstruction of the romance of the high fantasy genre, but that isn't entirely fair. Martin is very obviously deeply fond of the work of writers like J.R.R. Tolkien, and that affection shines through in his work. Martin is just more skeptical of power, dynasty, and class than Tolkien was. And Eye of the Seven Kingdoms suggests that nobility and valor do exist in this world, if the viewer knows where to look for them. It's worth stressing that Duncan is a nobody. The series leaves it somewhat ambiguous as to whether Sir Arlen did actually knight him, or whether Duncan is simply claiming that he did. We don't see the event happen on screen, we just hear Duncan claim it repeatedly. We know from ancillary material written by franchise creator George R.R. Martin that Duncan will be largely forgotten by history, much like Alice from that Baldry song.
Perhaps it is a story of honour. A misfortune girl making the best of her natural gifts.
One might wish for more.
But is this not the act of a dogged spirit, giving more than what is asked? The whole arm bone, as it were.
Perhaps her name does not matter then. It's her story that abides.
He is saying this to a character who has in this moment forsaken his own name, but he is also talking about himself. In a deeply cynical fictional universe reflecting a deeply cynical time, there is something romantic in the way that a Knight of the Seven Kingdoms believes in the true nobility of its common man, and what happens when that man gives more than what is asked. Perhaps, in the end, the story does somehow abide. I've been Darren Mooney, and this was The Backdrop.